Happy Sunday. Welcome to the Scoop World Order. A huge day. March Madness is kind of winding down, waiting for this game to end, but we're going to go because it looks like it's over. A huge week for Ohio State football. Potential five-star commitment incoming that we broke on BuckeyeScoop.com. We also have a lot of scrimmage in-depth detail on BuckeyeScoop.com. We had a huge show on it yesterday. Got some more information we'll talk about today. Connor Stalions did an interview with On3, which is On3 is a hurting turkey right now, boy. So we're going to talk a little bit about that briefly, and also take your questions as always and talk about some of the guys that are rising stock wise after this incredible week of practice for Ohio State as we head towards the spring game. Looks like there is going to be a spring game according to Ryan Days. So good on him for trying to put those guys in a competitive spot. But with that being said, as always, if you guys enjoy our content, please leave us a like, click subscribe, also click that little alert bell. If you do something huge for us, if you are an iPhone or iPad user, click on the podcast app, click on Buckeye Scoop, click subscribe there. Also on Spotify for my Android homies and PC homies. You can do it on both, and it's super easy to do. Easy way to help us out. So we appreciate that. As always, shout out where you guys are watching from. Shout out who you guys are watching with. And we're going to get right into the show. Nevada, start off with your buddy, Connor Stalions. He did another interview. It was painful to listen to, very unserious by those guys. But again, it's fine. It's whatever. Connor is completely irrelevant at this point. But it was some interesting things were said. What was your reaction to some of the stuff that was revealed?
Well, first of all, my reaction to there being a show and them kind of continuing to celebrate this idiot, I think that's probably the most telling thing of the whole, Connor Stalions media tour is that there's still an audience for this, that the Michigan people still consider him to be a hero, some sort of misunderstood genius. And, they want more. They can't get enough of the Connor Stalions stuff. And, I cannot explain to you how tone deaf that is and how badly that plays with the NCAA and with the people that are going to be judging them. It's just, it's a remarkable mistake by Michigan. They continue to do it over and over again. And yeah, they gave an hour of airtime here today on their On3, and they're just yucking it up. They just think it's the funniest thing ever that this guy's doing it. And, as far as the NCAA is concerned, he's the biggest cheater in the history of college football. We always talk about how would Ohio State act? How would Ohio State fans act? If there was a guy that had brought the program down, how would people feel about that? Regardless of if there had been a national championship along the way, I just don't believe that he'd be celebrated like this. But yeah, it was the usual drivel kind of going through. I mean, he did make the big admission that he felt that having advanced scouting did provide an edge to teams. And, like that was the most obvious answer of all time. But it was, I think he said up to 5% would be an advantage. But, it's always interesting how he always tries to, hammer home something about Ohio State had it first. Ohio State was cheating on us. Ohio State was doing it, but he offers no proof. It's the same old, deflection, deny, deceit type of, strategy that Connor Stalions has. But, it's just amazing to me that the Michigan outlets continue to have him on. And that Connor still believes that someday he'll be a coach, maybe a coach at Michigan when all the dust settles and they're going to move by. And I can't understand the delusion that goes on in a guy's mind like that, that he's so stupid that he doesn't realize that he's dead meat. He's spoiled milk. He's done. And this is the peak of his popularity at Michigan, because it's only going to go downhill from here, because when the punishments come down and when everything's handed down and Michigan's having to deal with this, people aren't going to be yucking it up so much. It's not going to be quite as funny. Him and Mr. T, I pity the fool, and also it's not going to be, quite a hobnobbing type of bunch anymore, because they'll have brought the program down, and he'll have been responsible for it in great measure. I mean, obviously Jim Harbaugh allowed this. Jim Harbaugh encouraged this. Jim Harbaugh, his tacit approval, allowed this to flourish, allowed this to be financed, allowed this to operate. The Connor Stallions was the opportunity. Friends and family, the guy that was doing it, and coworkers and little interns, and sending him on these grand road trips where it's like, hey, Kirk, I got an idea, okay? You need to drive 13 hours and then go to the game and then hold your phone up for 4 hours and do that and then drive back and give me the phone and here, I'll give you $500. And you're like, oh, okay, Mr. Stallions, I'm going to jump right on that. But yeah, it's funny to me that he's still a thing, but he is. The Michigan people love it. And I think that when you don't have any understanding about how much trouble you're in and how much damage you're doing, you continue to do more. And what's the old saying? Like, when you're in a hole, stop digging. Well, they're in a hole and they keep digging and digging and digging, and Stallion's only made it bigger. And Kirk, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, I'm over it. It's just, they're in a hole and they bought an excavator and with dynamite, and they're just, it's amazing, the delusion. Like, the delusion is it's incredible at this point with this kid, because he, again, if the sign stealing is only 3 or 5% and everyone's on, again, my favorite thing in the world is if everyone's doing it, then name them. Give us proof. Give us them being on the sidelines of the Central Michigan game. I mean, give them, all of the data. Again, like, when all of this comes out and they've got all of this electronic data and all these files are coming, because again, all of the crack, investigative journalists have served Michigan with Freedom of Information Acts, which they'll take 17 years to address because they don't really have to move on that at any sort of speed if there's not a court order. But like, the NCAA is going to have a lot of documentation of what went on, who the money went to, who got tickets transferred to them. Because again, like, that's the thing about now, man, is like, tickets are all electronic now. So, if you say, hey, Kirk, you're going to go to the Georgia versus Mercer game, and I need you to go get their signals, like, here's your ticket, I'll send it to you. What's your email? And you send it on the Ticketmaster app, and I drive 13 hours and go stand like this. And in the world of message boards, again, when there were those folks that were at Penn State and they saw some kids strangely, like, videoing like this, and then stopping it in between every play and stopping and getting the signals and stopping it between every, I mean, eventually someone's going to say, okay, this is really weird. I mean, you can't just be videoing a sideline without it raising eyebrow, or because again, a lot of the people that are they're down them seats, they've been to a lot of football games, and when someone's doing something really weird for the first time they've ever seen it, it's going to stand out pretty heavily. But I think that I mean, the delusion, again, that everyone was doing it, or everyone was stealing it, or Ohio State did first. I'm like, dude, like, prove it. Where's the proof? And again, like, don't act like you're protecting anybody, or this is some thieves honor or whatever. Oh, I'm not gonna snitch on them, but I'll just take the fall for everybody, and I'll be the face of the. Like, no, and again, Jim Harbaugh, who's he's the definition of the, if someone cheats, they should be executed, and all of his little quirkiness. Like, he was the lead, he was the ringleader of this. Again, he gave this guy game ball for picking all these signs and developing a system. And like I told you, I can see the pressure that was put on Connor Stalions. Like, again, when TCU all of a sudden, when they didn't have the signs anymore, I mean, they got absolutely massacred, because they weren't really that good. So, with Connor, I mean, he's got this immense pressure on him. Sharon Moore's livelihood depends upon it. McDonald's livelihood depends upon it. Jesse Minter's livelihood depends upon it. Where these guys, like, they got to get these signals, because all of a sudden, like, once you get used to it, you can't work without it because you're so reliant on it. So the pressure was on Connor to crack these signals. And again, when he gets on the show and he says, Ohio State uses the same live signaler for every single game, I'm like, well, how do you know? Oh, because you had video of their signalers for every single game, and you figured out that if it was whoever, if it was Keenan Bailey or whoever else could have been, Keenan was a signaler for a while before he moved up the ranks. But, I'm just saying, and again, it might not have been Keenan, it could have been anybody. But, in general, teams have the most senior GA or the most relied upon analyst or whatever as the lead signaler. Like in 2012, our Drew Maringer, who's the Titans coach for Oregon now, he was our lead signaler for every game. That was Tom Herman's right-hand guy. And we always had two interns stand next to him and do all kinds of, walk like an Egyptian dance moves next to him to throw the people off. So now again, that was 13, 14 years ago. There wasn't anywhere near as much counter espionage measures being taken like there is now. Now there's people hold up poster boards and there's people that hold up tarps so the people up top can't see it. There's awnings over the benches. I mean, it is. Ohio State has got the biggest amount of counterintelligence ever. And the funny thing is now, because of Hunter Stallions, there's radios in the helmets. And in Ohio State last year, with the amount of talent we had, they didn't want to take any chances, and they huddled. So they huddled all year with a radio in the helmet. So they were not about to, fall victim to the Connor Stallions goofing again. But I don't know, like a 3-5 advantage. I mean, I don't know, Nevada. I mean, you've dealt in the worlds. I mean, you've dealt in gambling, you've dealt in Vegas and all kinds of things. Like, there's some things that might be a slight advantage, and there's things like sign stealing, which I think is just an astronomical advantage. Even if you just know if it's a run to the right or run to the left, I mean, that's an astronomical advantage. But what are your thoughts on it only being a 3 to 5% advantage in some of these huge games?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's not just Ohio State that was concerned about this. I mean, you go back and there's quotes, I believe it's from the Alabama players where they're being told not to use their catapult system, or it was, I can't remember who it was, but it was one of the other teams. It's like, don't use your catapult and don't do that. I mean, they were concerned about the hacking. And as we talked about here, it wasn't just Ohio State's systems that Weiss was getting into. It was Penn State as well. So, you've got Penn State, you've got Ohio State, you've got Alabama, you've got Georgia, you've got TCU who changed their signals up. I mean, this affected a lot of people, and they were concerned enough about it to tell people not to even use the system. So, yeah, I think, from a practical standpoint, it makes no sense that the advantage would be that slight. But even if it was that slight, that's enough. That's enough. If it's 0.1%, it's enough. There's a reason for the rule. There's a reason that everybody doesn't do it. There's a reason why, if it was legal or if it was okay to do it, everybody would. This would be common practice for the teams to do that, but it's not. It's not, it's not allowed. And I think, for Michigan, they just want to continue to thumb their nose at the NCAA on this because the NCAA has lost some cases on NIL. As I've said many times, this is not an NIL issue. The NIL issues are about free trade and restraint of trade and other things. This is about enforcement. And the NCAA on enforcement actions is pretty much undefeated. So for Michigan to think that, the NCAA doesn't have power, the NCAA's, lost their teeth, the Tennessee Attorney General threatened them and they backed off, completely different circumstances. The second thing, and I've said this before, but it needs to be said again. The NCAA has a completely different format now for assigning punishment. They used to have an outside board that assigned punishment for these cases. They would do the enforcement investigation and turn it over to an outside board who would assess the penalties. That's how Kansas basketball skated. That's how some of these schools that were seemingly, had them dead to rights got away. Well, the NCAA was so upset with that, they got rid of the board. They do it all internally now. So it's a completely different form. So if you're a Michigan fan and you're counting on it like be going to the parole board and there was a bunch of bleeding hearts on the parole board. Well, those guys aren't there anymore. And now you've got Jason Statham and Sly Stallone and whatever on the parole. They're not in Chuck Norris. So you're not going to get off from the parole board this time. The independent agency that was doing the punishments they're gone. So I think for Michigan right now, especially with a third NOI looming, I mean, when this thing drops, at some point, even if you're the most fervent, die in the wool Michigan fan, at some point you've got to go, oh my, we're really in a lot of trouble, and we expect that third NOI to drop here, anytime in the next month. So I'd say in the next 30 days, this thing should drop. So when it does, remember where you heard it, remember what's going on, and Michigan's in a lot of trouble. They're in a lot of trouble, and continue to yuck it up, Connor. Continue to go on your little on three things. Continue your little cameos on Barstool and stuff. But when you get the punishment, just remember then it's not quite as funny then. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, like I said, I mean, it was like, obviously what Terrell Pryor did was nothing compared to this, but I mean, have you heard, outside of when he was in an NFL locker room, playing, have you heard a Terrell Pryor interview about Ohio State or anything at Ohio State or anything in the last 15 years, 14 years, 2011? I mean, obviously when he's in an NFL locker room and he's doing post-game conferences with the Browns and the Redskins and the Raiders, like, of course he's going to talk there, but like, I mean, have you heard him sit down with somebody and talk about Ohio State? I haven't. Maybe I missed it, and maybe I could have missed it, but I've heard Terrell's. Yeah, I've seen him in person, but like I haven't heard him tell a story or whatever. I mean, have you, Nevada? Am I missing that?
No, he hasn't. And the whole Ohio State case, though, really, when you think about kind of the legacy of these cases, for Penn State, obviously, we don't need to go into how horrible that was. That stain doesn't go away anytime soon. For Ohio State, it's kind of a joke now. I mean, it's kind of held up as what a ridiculous change of fortune. How silly times were back then, that trinkets and tattoos could get a coach fired, when now you could get millions of dollars to play in college football. So it's kind of like the Reggie Bush getting back the Heisman or something. I think Ohio State thing is just, it's kind of a joke. Now the Michigan thing, I mean, that's a state. I mean, they directly on field cheated, and I can't imagine anything worse, short of bribing the referees, that they could have done. And you're going to own this. I mean, you hacked into the computer systems. You're on probation. You send a coach or an analyst or full-time employee onto the sideline of an opposing team in disguise. You send stringers to 50 games to record. I mean, this is so bad, and they're going to own this forever. And to me, that's the best part. That's why some people get hung up on this doesn't go fast enough. Man, this cannot go slow enough for me, because I love the sort of Damocles hanging over their head and just continue to rock back and forth, because we know how this thing ends. And the longer the uncertainty goes, the worse it is for Michigan, the worse the punishments are going to be. And I can't wait. But like I said, this third NOI is going to be delicious, because that to me is like the cherry on top of the sundae in this whole thing.
Well, yeah, and like it's kind of like with the Matt Weiss stuff, which obviously was horrific in what he did, but I mean that took 2 years to come out. I mean, that was early 23, like about the first quarter of 23 is when he got whacked unceremoniously. Then 2 years later, you figure out everything that they were compiling and how deep it was and how horrific it was.
That was not federal. Josh Henschke can confirm that is not federal. This thing with Matt Weiss, just a little trivial little thing, just a misunderstanding. It is not federal. I mean,
I was like,
the internet is undefeated when you own receipts like that. It's like, oh my God, you are such an idiot. It's like, come on.
I mean, when you hack I mean, these class action lawsuits. I mean, there's advertisements now for law firms that are like, were you affected by the Matt Weiss data breach, hacking, downloading of your images, videos, contact us. Because again, that doesn't mean that these attorneys are just like, they feel like being good Samaritans. They think that this is going to be a humongous award for damages. Humongous. Again, because, I've dealt in insurance for a long time, and I know insurance really well. Cyber insurance, man, it's like if there is a breach, no matter how small it is or how big it is, you have to notify anybody that could be affected by it. which is again like the most popular one ever. I don't know if it's been 10 years, but it's been pretty close. Like the Target breach, when Target got breached, and that was probably 14 or 15. It's been a long time now. But I mean, when they got breached and there were, millions of credit card numbers stolen and on the dark web and everything, they had to send a letter to everyone that was affected. They had to buy LifeLock or whatever the thing is that monitors your credit, monitors opening of new accounts. I mean, just billions of dollars instantly in what they had to pay. Because again, that's huge. So for Michigan to sit on all of this for 2 years and not notify potential victims, and again, there's some people that still aren't sure if they're victims. I mean, it just, now again, could they have done it somehow silently and nobody? I mean, I can't imagine how. But I mean, that's a humongous error if that's what went down. Now, if they did notify everybody when it happened, okay. But and again, I don't know if there's a different statute for that. But again, there's no company in the universe that once they get hacked or they get broken into, none of them want to tell their customers, hey, by the way, someone on the dark web might have all of your credit card information, all of your payment information, your wire transfer information, because this happens to businesses all the time, especially middle market, smaller, medium-sized businesses that don't have dedicated IT teams. They get hacked, and it's like, there's an issue. Someone sends a bad wire, something gets intercepted, like whatever. They got to tell their customers, and again, it's embarrassing. And it's going to tick your customers off. The fact that they might have to change their credit cards, change their bank account numbers, whatever. But they got to do it because that's the law with cyber. So again, it's going to be really interesting because these lawsuits are going to be enormous, and I hope they've got a huge umbrella, which I'm sure Michigan does. They've got a huge endowment, and I'm sure that they've got smart people that run their risk management. But it's like, good God. So yeah, but the Connor stuff is, he's. Like if he's normally, I just feel like he runs with a lot of people that just aren't very smart, because he always feels like he's the smartest guy in the room, but he hasn't been in a room with like me in Nevada. So again, you can't, you might be able to run around these other guys, but you ain't gonna run around us. So it was pretty funny seeing some of the stuff that was said, and how I just roll my eyes at, I picked the signals off the TV copies, and yeah, I bought tickets for my mom and to go to the Rutgers, Illinois, whatever. It's comical. And it might work on the most feeble-minded, smooth-brained Michigan fans, which is all of them at this point. But it ain't working on us. So Nevada, any other thoughts on this? And then we can roll into some spring ball stuff.
Yeah, no. Can you imagine if he allowed us to cross-examine him for like 15 minutes?
Oh God, please.
Yeah.
For the love of God, open invitation anytime, man.
Yeah,
I can't wait.
Come on the show and let us ask you questions for 15 minutes about all the silliness that you spewed out of your mouth. Yeah, we're give us 15 minutes. That's all we ask.
That's all we need. I picked it all off the TV copy. I'm like, okay, you bring any TV copy of any game ever, and you show me how you pick signals. I can't wait. We'll do it live on here. Stream the whole thing. It'll be great. Show me what you're deciphering the 3 times that they showed a quarter of a signal. Show me. I want to see it. Well, I got it off the coach's copy. I was like, well, if they shot it that wide, when these guys trade film, they're not showing the signalers. I got news for you. I was in that world. Nevada, the first couple weeks are done. Big week here upcoming, and then you got the spring game coming up on the 12th. Sounds like. And kudos to Ryan Day. Ryan Day, is talking about potentially actually playing a spring game. I think that is probably the best measure. Again, I know that there's this paranoia about people, looking at your roster, poaching your players. But to me, if a guy's gonna leave, he's gonna leave. You're not gonna uncover some rock and say, oh my God, look at this guy. I didn't know that this guy was a superstar running back or receiver or D end or whatever. I think that that's just a little too paranoid for me, because I think that the positive is there's a lot of these guys that haven't played in Ohio Stadium as a Buckeye, guys like Max Clare played against us, and Ethan Oniano has played at Rice, and some of these guys need to get out there and dress and run around a little bit in the shoe. And because again, I think it's a different decision, because we got to open with Texas. You're not opening with Grambling. Like if it was the other way around, I wouldn't care as much. But I think these guys got to get out there and go, because the next time they're in the shoe, and they're strapped up to play a game, they're playing the Longhorns, and they're going to be playing an angry Texas team that we ruined their season last year, and it's going to be a fight. So I think that it's a good decision by Ryan. I think sometimes people are just a little too paranoid about this, because I always think, like, at this time in the spring, there's probably a third of the kids that are contemplating transferring in this next window. And it's probably kids that are older, or kids that maybe don't feel like they're getting a shot. And I don't know if not having a spring game or having a spring game is going to change anything, in my opinion. So, that's just the new normal. I mean, you guys look at college basketball, as soon as these teams are eliminated, they've got half the roster in the portal instantly. And that's just kind of the new deal. But, what are your thoughts on the potential spring game, and some of the people that have been stepping up over the first couple of weeks of spring football?
Well, I like having a spring game. I'm not scared of injuries, and this isn't like the old John Cooper thing about Ohio State fans like to gamble, but they like to do it in my chips. I just think look, the game of football is inherently dangerous. Somebody could get hurt in practice, carrying a television downstairs, whatever it is. Just play the games, and whatever happens, happens. I mean, you can take necessary precautions like making the quarterbacks so they don't get smoked or something like that. But I think in general a game is beneficial to the degree that you have it. In terms of guys that have moved up, I mean, look, CJ Hicks is having a big spring. They're playing that wide nine, which means they got the defense ends out wider and at kind of an angle off the edge, and he's real good at it. And Matt Patricia likes him a lot, but the defensive line certainly takes on a new element when you've got a guy like that's that athletic and that quick, and that's really been the spot that we've all thought was really his path to the field, but he's making it his path to the field. So CJ Hicks is a guy that I think is really having a good spring. Austin Sirewald, we've talked about him. I mean, look, he could start at a number of different positions on the line. I'm convinced he literally could start at virtually any spot on the line. He's that good. He's that versatile. Just a terrific player. Another guy that came into Ohio State, and people weren't having parades when Austin, showed up, but just a terrific player, terrific kid, and having a big spring, and I expect that to continue on into the fall and into the season for sure. And I'll say my last one would be maybe Jermaine Matthews. I mean, Jermaine Matthews is a guy that I loved him in limited action last year. I thought he was terrific. I thought he played a lot more snaps than you would think, but he's really stepping into the role. I just think he's going to be. I mean, as good as Devin Sanchez is, and Devin is the kind of the chosen one as a freshman. I mean, Jermaine's been here, and he's good. And Devin's going to be good. Jermaine's good now, like really, really good. And I think he's certainly been one of my standouts of the spring, and a guy that I'm really excited to see in the fall.
Yeah, I agree. I think that when the spring game, to me, I think it's fun because, and I think it's necessary because I think that the young kids benefit from playing a game in the shoe. Devin Sanchez, some of these guys, and a lot of these transfers too, just to get out there to play a game. I don't need to see JJ. I don't need to see Caleb Downs. I don't need to see Sonny Styles. There's certain guys that you can mothball, but Julian Sain's got to get out there and throw the ball a little bit in front of a crowd. Again, I love our fan base. Again, and I say this with all reverence in the world. Our fans are wild. They have high expectations, and I love that. Like, this is coming from a guy that in 2005, I'll never forget. We sucked on offense. I was on the Scarlet team. We had Justin Zwick playing quarterback, and I felt bad for him, because this is just like kind of crazy, but that's when I knew it was a little different. And we got booed off the field on offense at a spring game, at a worthless scrimmage. And I was just like, we went 3 and out on offense, and we come trotting off the field, and it wasn't like 100 people booing. It was the entire stadium booing our offense off the field. And I was like, I loved that. I was like, this is great. Because I mean, it was cold. It was rainy. It was a crappy day. And again, the spring games have in general recently been really beautiful weather. This was the worst weather in the history of spring. It was freezing rain, just terrible out, snowing, and it was just like, they booed us off the field at the spring game, and I was like, I love that, because like with Ohio State fans, man, every game matters, even if it's a game that doesn't matter. So I think that intensity is something that some of these kids need to see. I think Julian Sane needs to see it. I think Lincoln Keynote needs to see it, because our fans, right or wrong, and a lot of times they're wrong. Like again, when they're dead against, they hate Chip Kelly and they want Chip Kelly fired, and they want Will Howard sent to the gulag, and they want Ryan Day sent to Mars. Like, I'm like, just take a breath, guys. We'll be okay. And those of you guys that didn't go back and listen to our episodes after the Michigan game last year, like I kept saying, Vegas has this as the second best odds to win the whole thing, even after losing to Michigan at home in the most embarrassing defeat in Ohio State history. We still have the best team. And I was like, this thing's going to go one of two ways. Either this thing's going to be like the greatest story ever, or they're going to roll over 9. I know Jack Sawyer and a lot of these kids too well. Like, they're not just going to roll over at home. I mean, come on, guys. And then sure as can be, they lit the powder keg and at Tennessee, and they rolled, and the rest is history. So, but I am excited for CJ Hicks. I think, a thing that CJ Hicks, he's 240 now. I mean, he's right on target to be 245, 250 when the season starts. He's a guy that has to prove he can bull rush, because that's something with him. He's a smaller guy, a speed guy, but does he have enough explosion to put a tackle on his heels and bull rush him? And again, sometimes when you do that, you kind of sacrifice your rush where you're not going to get to the quarterback, but it puts it in the mind of the tackle that this guy could put me on my butt and embarrass me. Because there's nothing in the world worse than getting bull rushed by a little guy. But some guys that are explosive have devastating bull rushes. Like Marcel Frost is a kid that only you most diehard Ohio State fans will remember, but he was a defensive end that came in with me, and Marcel would bull rush the crap out of guys and he was only about 245. He's about like CJ, not as athletic and not as ripped up as him, but Marcel had like this shock with his bull rush where he would traumatize tackles that weren't ready for it. I was always ready for it, but it wasn't fun to go against, I promise you. So that's what he has to prove, because he's got the speed. I mean, he's got the speed to get around the edge, and there's nothing that a tackle has more nightmares about than just getting beat flat around the edge for a sack fumble, sack injury fumble, like that traumatizing play that can wreck a game. Like, that's something that that I think CJ can bring. And again, I like that he's really excited about it. There's nothing worse than when a kid isn't where he wants to be. When a kid's trying to figure out his home, and a kid that's got, this is it, man. And this is it. I mean, I'm not sure if he has another year, if he can waiver or whatever, but I think this is it. So, I mean, this is going to be, kind of make or break. And the depth chart in front of him is barren. I mean, you got Kenyatta, who's really, really having a good spring. You got Caden. But I mean, after that, I mean, it's you and a bunch of young kids, and you're the old guy. So you're probably the third guy right now. So I think the D-line is coming. Again, I think that there's a different spark to like Kenyatta when all of the sudden he doesn't have Jack and JT in front of him. And now when they call the first defense, like, you're going out there instead of always being with the twos for the last 3 years. So I think that'll spark some of these guys. Because again, these guys all want to play in the league. These guys all want to play in the NFL after this year. And most of them don't have enough significant tape to really warrant getting drafted. So some of these guys are behind the 8 ball, and they got to go knock it out of the park this year. And there's no reason that they can't, because we'll have the best offense in the country, in my opinion. So we're going to be up in a lot of games. So these guys can go get after the quarterback and tally the sacks and get the attention of the NFL scouts. And these guys all test well, because Mickey keeps them in such great shape. But and the last guy I'm going to mention that I think is going to be a lock first-round pick in 2 more years is Edric Houston. Edric Houston is a guy who's bullying my poor interior offensive guards right now. But he's got a lot of pop, and he's like my favorite kind of guy that's got kind of a different body, where he probably could get away with playing defensive end in high school, but his ideal position would be to gain weight and move inside and play defensive tackle, and just be like a freakishly athletic, pass rush terror on the inside, and that's what he's becoming. So I can't wait to watch Edric Houston this year, because I think that he's going to take the biggest. He might have the biggest leap on the team, in my opinion, now that he's a starter and he's found a home, and he's not a kind of a jumbo defensive end anymore. Now he's going to be a really quick and powerful 3 technique pass rusher, and I think him and Caden are going to be a problem. Now after that, I mean, it's just open for business, and some of these guys like Ty Malone and some of these other guys, they got to get rolling, because this is it. I mean, some of these guys have been waiting around for a while and maybe crying about playing time, and now it's open for business behind those 2 starters. Nevada, any thoughts on that? Or we could dig into some super chats.
No, exactly. It's definitely go time. I mean, this is a spring of go time for the older guys and the younger guys to make their moves, because there are lots of spots open. Specifically on the D line, on the ends and on the interior. We've got it's a young, inexperienced group. When you lose all 4 starters on your defensive line, you're going to have some holes, and we've got some gigantic holes. We've talked about question mark. That's my biggest question mark next to quarterback is, can we stop the run and can we generate a pass rush? And how are those guys going to do doing it? But yeah, no, I'm excited for it, because I like the young guys. I like the recruits that we had. I think some of them were chronically, and criminally starred, or whatever, underrated by the rating services. I think some of these guys are really good, can really play, and I think we're going to see that as spring goes on. You're going to hear more and more of their names kind of go as they flash, and I'm excited about the OSU defense. I think Matt Patricia's doing a terrific job already, and you're already seeing people kind of change their tunes on Patricia. Even the most the people that were like the most ardent critics are kind of going, well, maybe this Matt Patricia guy knows what he's doing. Well, yeah, he's won 3 Super Bowls, so I think he's going to be okay at the defensive coordinator spot, and I'm excited about that unit in 2025.
All right, let's dig into some super chats. Julie McFarland, thank you for the deuce. Is Funky related to Nevada IRL? I don't know. What's IRL? Do you know that one, Nevada?
IRL, I don't know. I don't know what look. We're all brothers here. Kirk and I are brothers, and Funky's our brother, and B Moses are brothers. So we're all Buckeye brothers here. We're all Buckeye brothers here, part of this community. So yes, and we are all related in that way, because we're all Buckeye brothers. Kirk's my big cuddly brother. Funky's my little hostile younger brother.
I always had a really illegitimate dad. I'll tell you that for sure. Because if we're all brothers, it's like that's a hell of an age spread between all of us. So yeah, the guys getting it in at an early age and a very old age. So yeah, we're all brothers here. Brothers in live betting UFC fights. All right, Dylan Lemon, thanks for the 5. Do you worry that Larry Ellison's influence and investment in UM football program will stifle the NCAA punishment and influence them to minimize? No, I don't think that you can't buy the NCAA. I mean, you can't. I don't think you can influence them at all. I mean, I know that there's this rumor about this investment of NIL and everything else, but no. I mean, the NCAA is fighting for relevance, and when you have a case like this where, I mean, I've talked to some of the best coaches in the entire country about this, and the amount of fury that they have when you talk about this, it's insane, and it's uniform. Again, when I talk to some of the best coaches, like Hall of Fame coaches, like guys that have won national championships at Ohio State and elsewhere, the amount of fury that there's no, oh, well, not, it's only 3% difference. It's only 5% difference at most. Like, I mean, no, it's not. I mean, this is a humongous advantage. Again, I always say it's like if I played poker for a living and I got to play against you and I got to see your hand every card, and I was going against you and you didn't get to see mine, and you're like, oh, well, that's only a 3% difference. Like, oh, I see you got, 4 of a kind, or you've got a royal flush, or you've got, a straight flush. Like, I'm gonna say, oh, you want to raise me? Nope, fold and see a small of a pot as possible. And when I see that you don't have anything and I can raise and raise and raise, and yeah, but that's only a 3% edge. There's just no way. again, this is just like in gambling. Like there's some information that's insignificant and there's some that is like ungodly valuable. So again, that's like knowing what play is coming on every single play is the ungodly valuable version. Nevada, your thoughts? Dylan Lemon, thanks for the 5. Or if it's Layman, I apologize. He said, do you worry that Larry Ellison's influence and investment in UM football program will stifle the NCAA punishment and influence them to minimize? What are your thoughts?
No, not at all. I mean, as you mentioned, I mean the NCAA. This is their Waterloo. I mean, this is the one they have to have. And Larry Ellison's influence is a non-issue, for them. They're literally looking at somebody who's kind of thumbed their nose, hasn't, they've lauded schools for excellent cooperation and kind of mitigated punishments, and still gave harsh punishments as a result, but those were mitigated somewhat by their cooperation. Well, Michigan's done exactly the opposite. They've destroyed evidence. They've mocked the NCAA publicly. They've stonewalled them. I mean, they've done everything they can to delay the inevitable on this thing. And the Michigan, remember, to know that Larry Ellison will have zero influence on this decision. And for Michigan, their best strategy would have been to cooperate from the very beginning. Beg for mercy, throw some of the bums out, and take their punishment. But they went a different way, and it's going to cost them.
Yep, completely agree. The Ohio podcast. If this is Eric Boggs, I appreciate you, my man. Make sure you guys follow the Ohio podcast. They do great work, along with the Buckeye Boys, which is Devin and Mello. 2 great independent sites. Make sure you guys support them. Go over to their YouTubes and click subscribe, like their content, and tune in. They have great live shows, and I know a lot of you guys like Steely and Sean Truck, the band of brothers. You guys all bounce around all the shows and talk to each other in the chats. Beth and Karis, I appreciate all you guys. So make sure you support these guys. These guys do great work. Connor is 100% in self-prevention mode with their fans in order to avoid it getting blamed when punishment comes down from the NCAA, i.e. Steve Bartman with the Chicago Cubs. Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's going to be hard, because when you're like, again, Connor Stallions he's like Stan from the Eminem song. I mean, he's so in deep, and like if the Michigan faithful or the university would ever turn on him, like it would be the most devastating moment of his life, because he's just that like in the bag, I guess. But yeah, I see it. I mean, the self-preservation thing, I don't know. I mean, the punishment is all his doing, but I also I blame Jim Harbaugh, because as I said, when he went to the Central Michigan versus Michigan State game, when you're a guy who makes $50,000 a year working at the University of Michigan in their whatever recruiting department or whatever his title was, you don't get, when you're working in the football program and it's a Friday night for a home game, first home game, everybody is all hands on deck all night. You don't when Mark Pantoni, he doesn't get to go home and hang out on Friday night because he's not a football coach. He goes to team dinner. He goes to the hotel. He hangs around the players, talks to the players. He's working the whole time, I'm sure, checking high school scores and film and DMing kids, whatever. But if you're in the recruiting department, you're still part of the thing. So, you don't get to just skip out and say, oh, hey, I'm going to go see a movie with my wife, or we're going to go to happy hour, or we're going to go out to dinner. No, you're in the building. So somebody gave him permission to leave and excuse him from all of the duties that come with the Friday night before a football game, a home game especially, and go watch go watch this game, go sneak in there. And again, do I think that it's some sort of grand coincidence that Jim McElwain, who's mid-60s, just decides to retire with $1.2 million left on his contract and just go move to Naples and play bingo and go to Mickle Bob's or whatever? I don't know. I mean, most of those coaches, you don't see many coaches resign unless they're jumping to a bigger job and a bigger payday. You don't see guys just quit and leave the money on the table. But he did, probably because he's gonna get fired for cause because under his umbrella, somebody let an active personnel member from Michigan on their sideline and gave him a little shirt and a little hat, and he had his little Google glasses on so he could look at Michigan State signalers live and in person. I mean, basically, it was like instead of sending a stringer to go and get the thing, he's like, well, I'll just do it myself. I'll wear my Google glasses or my whatever with my little cameras in them, and I'll just get them myself. I'll just watch it and see if I can do that. So I don't know. I mean, it's been a long, strange trip for a very delusional guy. Like again, when on the Netflix thing, they showed the NCAA interview, they're like, is this you? And he's like, I can't remember or recall if that's me or not. Like that's when you're dealing with someone who's like, I mean, he's Norman Bates at this point at the end of the movie Psycho. He's just completely delusional. Connor, Nevada, again, I appreciate you, Eric, and the Ohio podcast. Again, make sure you guys go and give those guys a sub on YouTube. Connor is 100% in self-preservation mode with their fans in order to avoid getting blamed when punishment comes down from the NCAA, i.e. Steve Bartman with the Chicago Cubs. What are your thoughts, Nevada?
Well, I mean, he's the face of the whole thing, so he's gonna get the blame no matter. I mean, I agree. He wants to try to avoid being Bartman, but Harbaugh's gone, and Harbaugh's kind of he's the head coach of an NFL team, kind of the beloved guy. So they can't really direct their fire at Harbaugh too much, but they will at him. I mean, they'll turn on him when this whole thing comes down. Yeah, I mean, he's going to be vilified, and it's not going to be quite as fun, and that's going to be devastating for him because I think he truly is so delusional that he doesn't understand what he did. And for Michigan, you know, again, for me, I don't blame Stallions. I blame Harbaugh 100%. I blame Lord Manuel. I blame the culture that they created. And if you go back and read the NCAA decision, even in Cheeseburger Gate, they talk about this culture of non-compliance that Harbaugh fostered there that made it okay for people to do bad things. And I've been told by several people close to this that wording on that Cheeseburger Gate was not accidental. It was pointed. It was there it was meant to be there for future punishments that are going to follow, because that's exactly what it did. I mean, Harbaugh, think about in Cheeseburger Gate, he went to the recruiting coordinator and said, break the rules. Go to the line and go over. I need to have kids here on the campus. He felt comfortable lying to the NCAA about whether he met these kids or not, or about being at a breakfast where they had him dead to rights on it. So, I mean, if you see your boss lying and cheating and stealing, it's not a far trip for you to go, it's okay for me to do the same thing. He's doing it. I can do it. And that's why the coaches are held to such a high standard. That's why the coaches are responsible for everything that goes on the program, whether they had knowledge or not. Knowledge of the act is unimportant in the NCAA's eyes. They are deemed to be responsible for it as if they did. Makes no difference to them. And that's what makes this whole Michigan thing so horrible.
Yeah, it is funny. I mean, because I see like why Connor did it, because when you're at Michigan and your coach is actively pushing for you to cheat, and the other thing you got to remember is like Jim Harbaugh's up against it. I mean, he was a year away from getting fired, and I've said this a million times. Like, if your company cuts your pay by half, and it's not because it's to stay in business, it's not because of COVID, it's not because, hey guys, we all gotta, if we want to stay in business, we all have to take, including the CEO, we all have to take a 50% pay cut so that we can stay solvent. Like that's one thing. Michigan has billions of dollars laying around, and they still went to Jim Harbaugh and said, yeah, we're gonna cut you from 8 down to 4. Public humiliation, no coming back from that. So, Jim was like, well, man, this isn't looking good. And so all of a sudden it was, well, let's see if there's a way we can gin this thing up so that I can become attractive again to an NFL team, and they might actually, raise up and hire me again. So it's just absolutely crazy to me that they went through all that. But again, like when you're Connor Stallions and you're trying to make it in coaching, and you figure out a way that you think you could make it quick, then You know, I mean, he got into it, and again, I saw the pressure on him in his eyes when it's like, man, these guys are really relying on my signals. How can I get this to be deadly accurate? Well, I could have people, stringers, go to every Ohio State game and get the signals for every game. And I could stay up all night and sleep in Schembechler Hall and break these things down and see who's the signaler and see who's doing what and whatever. Because again, this is a different cat, and this is, you know, Norman Bates at this point. Nick Modix for the 5. One clown on X said there is no active NCAA action against Michigan. You can't make this up. Well, that's why you don't go on Twitter for any sort of information outside of maybe the NFL draft or trade deadline or free agency or something like that, because there are a lot of really dumb people that don't really deserve to have voices that do have voices. So, yeah, Nevada, your thoughts on a clown on X, which is formerly Twitter, said there's no active NCAA investigation against Michigan. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, that's just silly. I mean, yeah, again, social media, I've said it many times, it's the devil. It's the place where the stupidest people in the world go and have a,
Yes.
you know, a microphone. So don't get any information from social media because you will be misled.
Yeah, and that's why, honestly, like, if you want great Ohio State information, like, Buckeye Scoop is where to go, because we moderate. This the thing about Twitter, this stuff, is there's no moderation. So there's nobody checking anything. It's like, you know, like when you get on Twitter, and again, the Twitter is great for some things, like for getting you know, a score for a game or insight on a fight or whatever, can be decent. But otherwise, you know, getting your news from there, it's like taking a bath in a septic tank. You know, I mean, it's not going to work out real good because there's so much.
Think about it. Think about it. The Michigan, you know, and I know we're not specifically talking about the Michigan beat, but they served 17 different search warrants on Michigan and Schembechler Hall on this Weiss thing, and it never got reported by the Michigan beat. They never reported any of this stuff going on. So it's like, you know, yeah, the idea that there's not an active NCAA investigation. Yeah, I mean, you guys didn't even report criminal guys, you know, seizing computers and grabbing laptops and, you know, crawling all over Schembechler Hall. You know, so the idea that you're missing an NCAA investigation is unsurprising to me. But I don't even think the Michigan beat, as dumb as they are, saying that right now.
Yeah, yeah, it is interesting. James Hammond, thank you for the 10. How's Julian Sain doing? I mean, he's doing well. I mean, you know, we're 2 weeks into spring practice, and there's, you know, there's always reports, guys, you know, have good days, bad days, good scrimmages, bad scrimmages. Julian Sain, in my opinion, is a lock to be our starting quarterback. Now, again, if something happens, if he gets hurt, if his shoulder falls out of the socket, like Braxton, I don't know. But again, this is spring football. We've seen coaches make mistakes on who the starters. I mean, I lived it. You know, guys might, you know, edge ahead or whatever during spring practice, but none of it matters till fall camp. And Nevada and I were talking about, obviously, this time last year, all I heard about was how bad Will Howard was. That's all I heard about. Every day at spring practice, every open media availability, Will Howard is terrible, awful. We have no chance, and whatever. Devin Brown's team, whatever. Devin Brown's going first, taking the first turn, and Will's running with the threes. And so, do I really care about the stock of us? I mean, I love hearing intel on scrimmages, but I take it with a 500-pound grain of salt, I guess you could say, because I just, you know, it's spring practice, guys. Like, most of the good guys don't even do anything during spring practice, so who knows? Nevada, your thoughts? You get a lot of intel on Julian. How's he doing so far?
He's doing fine. I mean, again, it's the same. That there was an Alex Gleitman report that came out that was saying he sucked, and it's just like, guys, this is what happens during the spring. And you're exactly right. Last spring, it was Will Howard was terrible. How are we ever going to even win a game? And keep in mind, right now, Ryan Day has got one goal with the quarterback plays: get him through healthy and keep Lincoln Kinos here into the fall. Because if Lincoln leaves, his backup quarterback is Tavian St. Clair. And in a 17 game season, not having a backup quarterback, is not a position that you want to be in. You want to have somebody who's at least functional, and to expect a true freshman to be functional is asking a lot. So, his goal is to pump up Lincoln as much as possible, convince him that he's got a chip in a chair and a chance at the starting spot, get him ready, have him looking good, have him making throws, get his confidence up, because they need him here in the fall. So I would expect to see more and more of these types of articles and stories and things and stuff. But now Julian Saint's the guy. He's fine. He's going to be good. He's going to be really good before he leaves. And look, I'm not anti-Lincoln. I hope when Lincoln comes in, I hope Lincoln balls out. And if Lincoln somehow beats out Julian Saint and takes the job and goes, man, I will get a Lincoln Keno's jersey and wear it and proudly cheer him on. I just don't think that's going to happen. But if he's better than Julian, we're going to be in really, really good shape in 2025 and beyond. So I'm rooting for it to happen.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I think that one of the undercurrent, most underrated, least reported on things is like we really need Lincoln to stay. And again, he's good enough to start at some places, but I feel like a lot of these quarterbacks are only as faithful as their options. And the quarterbacks is such a different animal because if you're an offensive lineman, if Ethan Onyanwa is dead set on being the left tackle here, but Austin Seyerveld beats him out and they end up playing him at right tackle, then that's okay. Like quarterback, like it's you or you're on the bench. There's not a rotation. This isn't receiver, running back. There's not that happy-go-lucky Trey Henderson, Quinshon Judkins type marriage where they can both have less tread on the tires for the NFL and work with each other and be each other's best friends. Like that doesn't work with quarterbacks. Quarterbacks, you're either the guy or you're not. So, but we need Lincoln to be here, and it's gonna be interesting to see how they manage that. But again, I'm excited about Julian Saint. I think he's fantastic, and he was the best quarterback in his class. So, again, Ryan and Billy Fessler and Brian Hartline. I mean, Ryan Day knows what great quarterback play looks like, and he's gonna keep the hammer down until one of these guys decides to be a first round level quarterback because that's what he needs. And Will Howard. Again, I watched Todd McShay the other day call him a second round pick. So Will Howard's kind of right on that cusp of elite. He had, pro day was exceptional, 65 completions and 2 drops. So he didn't miss a single throw. And that's kind of what you expect out of a guy like Will Howard. Julian Saint's got a lot of work to do. And he's young, dude. He's only a true sophomore. So he's not a veteran, 40 start guy like Will Howard was. So it's the thing I've said to you guys all year. There's going to be growing pains. Like these guys aren't robots. They're not cyborgs. They're going to throw picks and take sacks and do stuff that Will Howard just really didn't do much of last year. I mean, he threw a couple picks, obviously, but he was about as good as I've ever seen in an Ohio State jersey for a single season. So I don't know if Julian Saint will be able to match that. I hope he can. Hope he can get close to it. But he has the people around him, i.e. JJ Carnell, Brandon Innes, Mylan Graham, CJ Donaldson, James Peoples, Max Clare. This is the best tight end room we've ever had, one of the best receiver rooms we've ever had, an incredible running back class, and a really good line. So, I mean, this isn't like he's, landing on a desert island trying to survive. Like he's showing up to like the Ritz-Carlton trying to survive. It's a whole different kind of imagery there. JB Coburn, thanks for the 5. The Thibodeau scandal feels like a mixture of Sandusky and Shapiro scandal, but with more. Whatever comes to them, I don't feel bad. Yeah, I mean the sexual predator thing is covered with Weiss, and then the Shapiro thing where it's just this little loser hanger-on dude, which is kind of what Connor Stalions is. It's got that angle too. I don't feel bad either because again, this costs people their jobs. You see when some of these guys, some of these guys react. Again, I always go back, and I've said this so many times. I mean, I said this to, a Hall of Fame national championship level coach. I was like, when James Franklin goes into really deep detail as to the effect of having someone signs, and he talks about, and again, I'll pull the clip, I'll find it, I'll send it to any of you guys that want it. But he talks about how, when it's 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1, and they go 13, which is 3 tight ends, 13 personnel, and every tendency in the universe, everything in the world says that you're going to run it, try to be tough, get that thing, and you call a shot play, which is a deep throw to one of your tight ends, to your really good tight end who won the Mackey Award, and they happen to be in 2 deep safeties versus 3 tight ends. Nobody in the entire world would call that defense versus 3 tight ends. You got to load the box up, try to stop the run, go man-to-man across the board. But Michigan just happened to be in zone right when it happened. So again, it's not, when people say, oh, that's only a 3 or 5% difference, I'm like, oh, really? So, when you know that they're going to throw it deep, despite a personnel that everything in the world says that they're going to run the ball and try to convert, that's not a huge edge. It was. James Franklin thought so. Shiano thinks so. Ryan Day, I mean, just fury. So is what it is. Nevada, your thoughts? The team up north, scandal feels like a mixture of Sandusky and Shapiro, but with more, whatever comes to them, you don't feel bad. Does it feel like that to you, Nevada?
Yeah, no, it's got all the elements. Like you said, it's got the creepy Weiss thing, which is super creepy. The Connor Stallions thing, the guy on the sideline in the recording glasses, that's an original thought though. That was one that we have not seen before. And as for feeling bad for him, no, the only thing I feel bad for him is that they can't burn twice, and they can't get it punished enough for me. So whenever it happens, I'm going to be cheering. I promise you.
Yep. Jamie Coburn, thanks for the 10. Out of the team up north, quote, 3 successful years, I feel 2023 was the only legit year, not near the talent level we faced. Sorry, had more to say. Happy Monday from Japan. Konnichiwa. Nevada OH. That's awesome. I'm glad you're watching it from Japan. I can't imagine what hour it is. It's obviously morning time for you, so that's amazing. I always love. That's why I always say shout out where you guys are watching from, because I always get a kick out of. Well, we can see kind of on YouTube like where people are watching from, and it's literally global. I mean every outside of Antarctica, every continent, there's people watching our show, which is amazing. But I appreciate that. That's awesome, and happy Sunday night from Ohio. We're about to hit by a crazy storm, it looks like. So, but I appreciate you, my man. Thank you so much. Julie McFarland again. Oh, she's back. Thanks for the 5. I appreciate you. Said IRL in real life, Nevada. In real life, Nevada, you got to get up on your lexicon, 'cause I had no idea either. So, in real life, Nevada, me and Hubs watched nightly. I appreciate you guys. I'm glad you guys enjoy the show. And you settled a question we had. I kept insisting that Funky was Nevada's son. Hubs, correct again. We're all brothers here on the Scoop, Nevada. Correct. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, like I said, we're definitely all brothers, and some people think that Kirk is my illegitimate son because because we've got the same build. We were similar disposition and stuff like that. But yeah, I think I like to say I have a lot of sons here, but we're all brothers. So we're kind of brothers, and I have my son, and my big cuddly son is my partner. So.
A lot of sons running around Las Vegas right now.
A lot of that's true. That's very true. Very true.
Like, oh my god, it's like they all go to Circa and they all pass each other, and they're just walking past the long. That's why they put Nevada built the longest bar in history, so they can all sit there and bet, and then none of them will know. You built the biggest swimming pool, the Circus Stadium swim. And it's like they're all there, just like ships passing in the night. It's amazing.
23 and me. 23 and me.
23. It's about 23 of you is more like it. All those Las Vegas Thunder reunions are going to be great. It's like, hey. Oh my God, I'm dead. All right, let's wrap this thing up before we go crazy. Nevada, any final thoughts?
Yeah, that should be a big week. Good week 3 of Ohio State spring ball. Again, I like to speak of these things, and we'll pray for no injuries and let things go. And we're 1 week closer to the hammer falling on Michigan. So, yeah, it's a good week. And Michigan basketball's done too, which is nice. So they made a departure. So if you're a Michigan fan and you're unhappy, I'm happy that you're unhappy. So have a great week.
There's no love for us from Michigan. I hate Michigan, and I love their pain. It's the greatest thing in the world. All right, with that being said, Appreciate you guys being a part of the show. As always, if you guys enjoy our content, please leave us a like, click subscribe. Also, click that little alert bell. Again, if you want to help us out a huge way, get on your iPhones, type on the Purple Podcast app, and then click Buckeye Scoop, type in Buckeye Scoop, click subscribe. We've been growing that. We appreciate you guys. Leave us a 5-star review so people can find it. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube. Make sure you guys shout out our boys on Buckeye Boys and Ohio Podcasts. Tell Buckeye Scoop sent you. Again, we appreciate those guys. They do great work. They're on here all the time, and we just appreciate them so very much. So, again, shout out where you guys are watching from. Shout out who you guys are watching with. Again, shout out to my man in Japan. That is awesome. I low-key love Japan because I use them on Civilization, computer games. So if you guys are Civilization nerds, holler at me. But Japan's who I roll with. They're awesome. So with that being said, I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. Thank you so much, Buckeye Nation. And thank you to the Scoop family. We'll see you guys tomorrow at 7:10. Be ready to roll. Hope you guys have a great rest of your night. Go Bucks.